We are good, good morning or good afternoon if you're in Bangkok or Yangon. We are Forces of Renewal or FORSEA. My fellow co-founder and Thai brother, Pavin, Professor Pavin, is in Kyoto, and I am in London, outside London. Today we are to discuss comparatively the two countries' histories and politics that involve military coups. And Thailand and Myanmar have become two of the most coup-prone countries in the world. And military coups have proven to be not only repressive in the short run, but nation destructive, nationally destructive in the long run. Thailand has almost a century of military coups, starting in the 1930s. That ended, the first one ended the absolute monarchy. So that coup may have a progressive purpose and element, but following that one, Thailand has been locked in a vicious cycle of military generals intervening to defend their own power, privileges, and primacy in Thai politics. In my country, or Burma, the very first coup started in 1958. I think there's a misunderstanding that 1962 was the first coup. No, that was the second coup that was openly launched by General Ne Win on the 2nd March 1962. The first coup took place in 1958, but that was made to look like a constitutional transfer of power by the then sitting Prime Minister UNU to the Commander-in-Chief General Ne Win. UNU was made to sign the pre-drafted letter that was brought to his home by two of Ne Win's deputies, Brigadier General Aung Ji and Brigadier Maung, who said that you need to sign this letter to avoid bloodshed and to make it look like a constitutional and lawful transfer of power. So without further ado, I want to invite Pavin to share his thoughts on his country's military coups.
Thank you so much, Sani. Yeah, you're right. We have too many coups in Thailand from 1932, which ended the absolute monarchy. I think a lot of Thai historians, try not to term the 1932 abolition of absolute monarchy as a kind of military coup, but rather a revolution. But whatever the terminology would be, so that seemed to sort of set Thailand into a new stage, a stage of a kind of constitutional monarchy. But as evident, from that point onward, I don't think Thailand had followed, the path of democratization. I do not want to talk too much during the period of the Cold War, because to be honest, there are so many coups. Up to today, the last coup in Thailand was in 2014, which overthrew Yingluck Shinawatra, from the premiership. Some people have already lost count of how many coups that Thailand have had. I think so far, we might have had something like 22 or 23 military coups. Nonetheless, this, put Thailand up, in terms of having the most military coup in Southeast Asia, in whole ASEAN. We can talk about ASEAN a bit later, especially ASEAN response to the coup in Myanmar, the fresh one, and also the past coup Thailand. But not only that, in terms of the record in the world, Thailand stand, I think, around like top 3 of the country having the most coup. That seemed to show that the military seemed to assign itself as a key institution in moving the country forward. But time and time again, the military has proven that each of its political intervention had brought nothing but instability to the country, right? I will only want to focus in the last 3 coups before I throw it back to Dr. Sani to talk about the latest one, which I think a lot of audience here, especially my Thai audience, want to hear so much about what really going on inside Naypyidaw, in the past few days. But I mean, just briefly to sort of giving sort of foundation, for the listener here. The last three, I think the one that's for me the most memorable, especially during which time that I have grew up and then try to understand Thai politics, is what it was in 1991, the one that overthrew General Chatichai Chunahwan. That was very important because Chatichai, as a prime minister, as an elected prime minister in almost 10 years, came in with fresh idea at the end of the Cold War, wanting to eliminate battlefields in Indochina, and wanted to turn it into marketplace. And suddenly, when battlefields was replaced, it seemed like the role of the military disappeared as well. So in many ways, the political intervention of the military in 1991, that was a part of the military wanting to defend its power position. And that's why the coup took place in 1991. And it led to a tragic incident in 1992 when a deadly crackdown was launched toward the people, leading to a number of people, being killed on the street of Bangkok. It was very important because I think at that point as well, it seemed to suggest the peak of the royal power, at the peak of basically King Bhumibol Adulyadej. Because if anyone, grown up enough, they would have remembered that night, in 1992, May, when the king appeared on national TV and then calling upon the two opposing factions, one the military, Sujinda Kharpayun, and one is the leader of the so-called People's Movement, Major General Jamrong Simeung. That was, such an iconic photo. If I remember that, once again, the king seemed to play a role of force of unity. But it did not really last because, that coup in many ways set a new stage, for democratization that Thailand eventually achieved, at the end of 1997 when we produced the most democratic constitution of 1997. That 1997 constitution paved the way for someone like Thaksin Shinawatra to come, into the political scene, leading to his landslide election, in 2001. And not only that, because of his successful populist policy, he came back in 2005 in the second election, an even bigger landslide than the first one. So suddenly Thaksin became a threat to, again, the position of power of both the military and the monarchy. And that's why anti-Thaksin demonstration sort of being created by royalists, pro-monarchy, backed by the military, leading to the coup 2006. Thaksin has proven that he would not want to give up. And more importantly, I think Thaksin political influence has lasted, because I think Thai people seem to remember, the benefit, from the Thaksin regime, if you want to call Thaksin regime, especially in terms of a fairer distribution of political and economic resources that Thaksin offer to the Thai. Okay, I will not drag on for so long. The political influence of Thaksin was so immense that even the coup of 2006 was unable to remove Thaksin influence from politics. And it had proven that even until 2011, Thaksin proxy, Thaksin, there's a lot of Thaksin proxies in 2008 as well, through Samak Suntharaware, through Somchai Wongsuwat, and then eventually through Yingluck in 2011. Now, from 2001 until 2011, there were 4 elections, 2001, 2005, 2007, and 2011. Out of these 4 elections, Thaksin and Thaksin proxy won consecutive election. So that go to prove that Thaksin popularity was so just unstoppable. Yingluck came in 2011. It came at a critical time when King Bhumibol was already hospitalized, and his ill health sort of stir up a sense of anxiety among the network monarchy. And I think they planned that they wanted to make sure that it had to have a kind of smooth royal transition, and that's why the coup 2014 took place, and the rest is what we know.
Yeah, I mean, I will definitely go into the Burmese coup, but it seems to me that there are some really important parallels in the way the Thai military responded to Thaksin's consecutive wins and immense popularity. But I want to ask you one important question. You said at the time the palace, King Bhumipol at the time. I remember in 1992 he brought two opposing leaders to the palace, and who they were all, of course, like in the in the feudal tradition, on their knees, on the carpet, right? And the king was mediating and saying the basically the coup is bad. But has Pale has that of course, like anyone who could mediate a coup leader and the other side, that was supposed to be, or the act itself was supposed to be seen as progressive. Coups can never be accepted under any circumstances, right? Because if you're a Democrat, that's what I mean. Would you say that the palace has been progressive when it comes to military coups, or would you say that was an exception rather than a norm? I want to understand the role of the palace. Sure, has it been progressive in democratizing, the Thai politics and society?
I would say that the king's intervention in politics is a sort of political culture, right? Whether it is a progressive or not, I mean, well, in terms of the king wanting to bring prosperity to marginalized people. I mean, if you want to call it progressive, then it is progressive, right? But I think when it comes to the domination of power, I'm sorry to say that, the monarchy has forged a very intimate relationship with the military in obstructing democracy rather than to promote democracy. And the fact that the king, came out in 1992, basically to stop the bloodshed. A lot of people, praise it as, oh, this is it. This is the solution of Thai politics, right? It was not really a solution of Thai politics. It was basically sweeping all the dirt underneath the carpet, right? Because at the end of the day, the king did not tackle what brought the military into politics in the first place, because the king is a part of that kind of liability as well.
What gave the Thai institution of military, Royal Armed Forces, such commanding position in Thai national politics? What were the structural or institutional factors that put Thai military in such dominant position vis-a-vis civil society, political parties, the parliament?
Well, its dominant position basically was promoted by the military, the monarchy itself. From 1932, military was a part of overthrowing the monarchy. So, and after that, there was a kind of power struggle between.
Can I ask you, if the military ended the absolutist monarchy and reshaped the monarchy as a constitutional one, while the generals backseat drive and control the monarch as the figurehead, right?
Well, that only the first part, Sunny, right? That is only the first part until around 1959, late 1950, with military strongman Sarit Thanarat, when the two men met, Bhumipol and Sarit, and they realized that there's a lot to gain from working together. I think from that point onward, you started to see interdependent relationship rather than either one of them taking either one of them as puppet, if you know what I mean, right? I mean, it become a kind of working relationship that the military wanted so much to promote the monarchy, at the same time as the monarchy wanted to rely on the military in order to strengthen its position as well. It had been like that.
How do in this new symbiosis, that was consciously forged by originally two opposing sides. You know, the monarch, they would love being absolutist monarch, right? Because, like, you know, I'm also,
Sure.
you know, from all the feudal society with the feudal institution. The monarch owned everything, right? The land, property,
Yep.
movable,
Yep.
unprofitable, even lives. That's an expression we have in Burmese, right? The monarch own you, your life, right? He say one thing and you die or you live.
Sure.
So the military ended the absolutist power or the absolutist reign. But and then you know, what are the material benefits out of this symbiosis, and how do the Thai public benefit from this symbiosis, if there is any?
Well, I mean, there's nothing for us to benefit from this kind of
I mean,
alliance
commoner
between
Thai citizens.
some Thais. They still, you know, they still have an image of the monarchy as a kind of head of state. Even, you know, during the decline of the monarchy, I guess that, I mean, this is sort of typical of, you know, ancient Southeast Asian state. I'm sure that there would be this kind of perception among Cambodian people that, you know, the reason that they still, you know, love and respect King Sihanouk, no matter what he did, you know, for the country, including now, you know, his son. I think because, you know, some people tend to find monarchy as a symbol of nation, right? And
So
of
there's
course,
a
this has
part of their identity, a source of
exactly,
pride, right?
yeah. But of course, we have to remember that it has been done through state propaganda, you know, for so many years,
But the
and it's
state
some,
was controlled by the military, right?
yeah, yeah,
All the
definitely.
propaganda apparatuses.
I mean, in when I said in 1959, I mean, a lot of situations, a lot of circumstances, you know, seem to bring the two institution together. I will talk about the Cold War in a minute because that is so important. But at that point, the king was still young, right? The king, I mean, he was not powerful, so he thought that for him to bring back the power of the monarchy, maybe he might have to rely on the military. At the same time, Sarit Thanarat realized that maybe using Phumipol as a figurehead could be beneficial to the military. So that's why at the start, it's sort of like depending on one another. And the military was so clever in trying to equate the security of the monarchy as security of the nation. So immediately, monarchy is equal to nation. Why it's so important? Because from now on, defending the monarchy is now equal to defending the nation and is now become an obligation of the military. So I mean, this is
So you the Thai armed forces personnel, they swear oath of allegiance
yeah,
to the monarchy, not to the people.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, this has long been a practice. Not only that, Phumipol, when from 1950, he had grown up a lot to realize that there's a lot of things that he could manipulate also through the military. For example, he assigned himself as, oh my God, I forgot the term, but it's sort of the supreme commander. So the king also military man as well. And this position has been, I mean, has been succeeded, you know, by the current king. So the current king also has a career in the armed forces, but he also become a figurehead of the entire army. So you can also see this link, right?
Yeah.
Monarchy and military, yeah.
What kind of economic arrangements or the benefits, yeah, has this symbiosis produced for both parties, the palace and, you know, the palace? When we say the palace, we're talking about one family, right? And assemblage of aristocratic elements around the palace, right? And then the military, the generals, you know, the institutions and individual generals. What kind of economic relations have they built?
Again, this is very complex because, you know, through the 1960s, 1970s, when I said that there's the Cold War, you know, which has become such an impactful, you know, a factor in the relationship of military monarchy and also the United States. But okay, I will focus on your question first about the economic side of it. you know, the Cold War in United States basically propelled the two institutions to the forefront of the Thai politics. In doing so, the monarchy and the military moved into also dominating the business sector as well, right? Especially the monarchy. I mean, you have to admit that King Bhumibol was so brilliant, in terms of doing his own business through the Crown Property Bureau, right? So now the Crown Property Bureau owning almost everything in Thailand, especially, real estate, prime estate, location in Bangkok.
It's
and
worth,
also,
worth billions, right?
yeah, I mean,
billions of dollars.
Making him the richest monarch in the world for more than a decade, including the current one now, still the richest monarch in the world, estimated asset of up to 60 billion US dollars. Along the way, the military sort of, tag along, in terms of going into business as well. I don't know whether you have this in Burma, in Myanmar, but also
certainly there are so many parallels here. So I'll let you finish your thoughts on that Thai.
But this is interesting because we have Thai military bank as well.
So I don't know whether openly Thai military bank. Yeah,
but you have
that and others.
You have that in Myanmar?
Yes, of course. Yeah, Myawaddy and others.
Right, but we have this. The actual name is Thai military bank. So, and a lot of Thai people know that, it would never go wrong, because if it go wrong, it means the army would go wrong. And because we know that the army has become so powerful that's why whatever business that the military has involved in, there's some kind of guarantee behind it. Right.
Yeah. So carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, lastly is when I said the Crown Property Bureau and also the businesses that the military had engaged in, is now has been done, through what you call the network monarchy. And I think people who familiar with Thai study by now would have known this sort of terminology of network monarchy. That
what does network monarchy mean for those who are not Thai specialists?
It's bring together the key stakeholders in Thailand. Mostly non-elective institution, not elective institution, of course, right? For example, the monarchy, the military, senior bureaucrat, okay?
Including what about the Thai Senate? Thai Senate, as I understand, is not staff stacked with people who are elected by the people themselves, right?
Yeah, that come later. That come, the Senate is another thing that is too complicated as well. But you could maybe perhaps include the Senate as well, together with big businesses, including a lot of middle class, Bangkokian and also royalists. They come up and work together. When Prem Tinsulanon was still alive, he was the one who helped, who became the engine, or what we know as, CEO of the network monarchy, basically putting the right man, in the right job. This is something might be very similar to Myanmar as well. Military shuffle and everything, it had not been done through political process. It had been done specially, outside the political process. And when Nippon and Prem were both alive, the network monarchy was sort of behind.
So this is the arrangement, the basically structural or institutional arrangement with economic and political advantages that are distributed among these three institutions, right? The capital of the national bourgeoisie, center around Bangkok, big businesses, banks and corporations. And then you've got the palace, the royal family, and his or her, the family's assemblage of aristocrats and whatnot. And then you've got the, you've got the Thai military. And then there's also a feudal, military-controlled, feudalistic Thai bureaucrats or states, right? So you've got this. And then my understanding is that Thai monarchy is not just an average monarchy. Thai monarchy was also, or is, Buddhist monarchy, right? And so that is attractive to that was attractive in the context of Cold War for the Americans, because the Cold, you mentioned Cold War earlier, because my understanding of Thai the context is that the king was used and the palace was used as a defense against this encroachment of communism and any progressive ideology. And correct me if I'm wrong. There's a very strong ideological element to to this than just simply economic and power arrangements, right?
Well, I would say that again, with the United States and the Cold War, it's continuing to be interdependent. So the king was used, and also the king used the United States as well, right? So I mean, communist threat just came at the right time. I'm sorry to say, it came at the right time because it sort of provided, a much needed alliance between these three, actor, military, monarchy, and United States, under the pretext of emerging, threatening communists, in the region. And then all of them, took benefit out of it. For United States, of course, using the monarchy, the military, the most powerful institution in Thailand and it's needed because that would be useful in containing communism in Southeast Asia.
At the ideological level, right? In terms of people's consciousness, definitely. Right?
But then domestically, it also becomes so meaningful and useful for both the military and monarchy in trying to eliminate, opposition by branding them as communists.
I mean, I was talking to Ajahn Pongchai, and he was explaining how the student uprising in 1976 was portrayed by the Thai media and also Thai state, as well as the crowd that came to lynch students. These are like Marxist, Maoist, communist, anti-statist.
So we can wrap this up by saying that the situation has not changed much. In the 1970s, pro-democracy students were accused of being communists. And then because of that, it gives legitimacy to the state authority to eliminate them. Now, fast forward, to 2020, 2021, that's no longer communist. But today we have so-called anti-monarchists. When you brand someone anti-monarchist, once again, you give legitimacy to the state authority to purge you. For me, to ban me from coming home. For those unfortunate people across, the Mekong, they were abducted, they were killed, just because they were branded as anti-monarchy.
So anti-monarchy is basically traitors, treasonous individuals against the entire Thai state, Thai society, right?
Like communists in the Cold War.
So the latter day equivalent of the old communists. Yeah. So now, it is really fascinating because for the Thai audiences, I think the most striking thing would be, I would say, with some qualifications, the Thaksin Aung San Suu Kyi parallel. Yeah? And of course, you said that in 4 consecutive elections, the former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra and his associates, including his own little sister, they beat the military-backed, palace-backed political parties in every single election, right? Because although the palace was engaged in successful, the social programs, or like economic development programs in different places, the king and the queen were involved, but it was Thaksin who basically unleashed the economic and political aspirations of Thai rural masses who have, until Thaksin's time, were treated as country bumpkins, utterly in quotes, stupid, uneducated. And so therefore they should not have a voice in the way Thai national institutions were run. And Thaksin inverted them, right? So he changed that structural equation and unleashed the energy of, basically voters from around the kingdom, right? So therefore, in this situation where Thaksin found a niche to be the spokesperson, to be the defender of the marginalized communities that outnumber the Bangkok elite. So therefore, he and his associates always beat the palace's favorite political parties, right? So we have a similar situation in Burma. If you look at the elections in Burma, I'll go into the elections, during Ne Win's time later, but suffice it to say now, if you look at 1990 election, starting 1990, yeah, and that was in 1989, Aung San Suu Kyi was already locked up in July, right after her mother's the funeral. And despite the fact that she was placed under house arrest, and co-founders of her party NLD were put under house arrest, the NLD went on to win a landslide election, right? So the scale of NLD's election victory was such that it shocked the military, and they fear that there will be accountability process that because there were talks of like Nuremberg tribunal for Kenyon and that kind of thing, right? And you were at the time working with the Thai foreign ministry, and so you will be very much informed. And then I move forward 2012. That's when Aung San Suu Kyi start to enter the parliamentary politics, as she and NLD contested in by-elections in, I believe, April 2012. So there were 44 seats vacant, and at the time, the Militaries Party, Union Solidarity and Development Party, with President and ex-General Thein Sein as its head, out of 44 seats available and contested, Suu Kyi's party won 43 seats. That's more than 90%. That is not just simply a landslide. That is so crushing. And then that was followed by 2015 election, where Aung San Suu Kyi's party openly participated and fielded candidates across the country. And she, the NLD won a landslide against the USDP, which is the party of ex-generals and military veterans, and which the military in Burma uses as its proxy. In addition to the 25% constitutionally guaranteed seats in the parliament for the military officers, right? And then then comes 2020, right? This time, Aung San Suu Kyi's party did not simply win a landslide election. It crushed the military's proxy party USDP, to the point of the USDP being unable to field or unable to have any significant say. Out of a total of 476 seats in the parliament, that were contested, and the military seats are not contested. They are constitutionally allotted to army officers, right? And so USDP, Army's proxy, won only 33 seats out of 476. And Aung San Suu Kyi's party won nearly 400 seats. Think about it. So her party took over 80% of the seats in the parliament, and the military's party got less than 9% of the seats. So Aung San Suu Kyi's electoral power and legislative power became unchallengeable. It is just so dominating that the military fear that there could be other negative consequences or ramifications from Aung San Suu Kyi being in such commanding heights, right? And then, as you know, like, a lot of people try to explain that the coup was triggered by the personal ambition of the commander-in-chief Min Aung Hlaing. Well, you know very well. I mean, the military coups are actually institutional acts. This is not like activists going out on the streets with 5 people and protesting. It requires a lot of careful planning, strategic thinking, right? It requires a lot of what do you call it, outreach to potential constituents that could play the spoiler role. Yeah. So in other words, like the Thai situation, it is actually, in my view, the Burmese coup took place out of multiple institutional considerations. You also asked, like if we Burmese have the situation where the military run banks and businesses. So one of the greatest similarities, to finish my train of thought previously, like Thaksin and his associates, Aung San Suu Kyi always beat military-backed parties, hands down. In 4 consecutive elections, 1990, 2012 by-elections, 2015 general election, 2020 elections. In 4 consecutive elections, in 30 years, the military could not play this election game with this woman and her party and expect to win. Their 30 years record of being beaten badly, by the NLD is enough. So that, this is a striking parallel. I understand like Suu Kyi and Thaksin, they are very, very different characters, right? And and then my last comment on this is the economic ties. Yeah? If we say national armed forces, if they are professional and not politicized or political, like the US or UK or Japan, armed forces are national bureaucracies. Their main objective is national defense, right? And they're not even law and order. Law and order is done by the whole ministry, police and police intelligence and civil administration. But the armed forces of your country and my country, they have 3 multiple functions. One is the power for themselves. The second is the national defense, of course, and third is economic, right? This economic aspect, yeah, and makes them, in my view, mafia-like gangs, yeah. And they are armed, they are organized, they are ruthless, they are brutal, and they are trigger happy, yeah, just like all the mafia, the characteristics. And what makes them mafia rather than patriotic national defense organization is this economic dimension. In Thailand, the economy is split between the palace, Bangkok corporate elite, and the Thai military, right? In Burma, the economy is split between cronies and the Burmese military. The Burmese military run 2 large military conglomerates, and they control the largest share of national economy. So therefore, it is not simply political and ideological or even personal of any general. There's so many vested interests that the military as institutions and a group of generals will never be prepared to give up. What's your response to my comparison?
Well, yes, I agree with you. That I used to do a lot of work on Myanmar, Burma before, but then I just basically walk away from it. So, I would not claim today that, I am a sort of expert, so-called, on Myanmar. I have a question though, and this is something that, when I talk to my Thai friend, and they also became very curious. What do you think about the role of Aung San Suu Kyi? Now, there is sort of an argument that because she tried so hard, to amend the constitution so that she could become the president. And then along the way, she tried to please the army so that the army would allow her to do so. But at the end, of course, the deal was broken. And this also go into the issue of Rohingya. And I know that you have been working on the issue of Rohingya, the genocide before. And as people who are watching this know that we have a lot of work done on FORSEA, on the genocide too. Can you sort of explain a little bit, and for the interest of time, so that I have another question about ASEAN, but if you can just tell me your perception on Aung San Suu Kyi role, her relationship with the military, and also the complication of all this with the Rohingya issue.
Yeah, I mean, Aung San Suu Kyi is the daughter of the founder of the Burmese army or armed forces. So we call it Tatmadaw, or royal, like a military. She started out as the iconic, mobilizing figure, or someone whom the entire Burmese public could rally around, right? Mm. So the Burmese society and the public, especially majority Burmese, revered Aung San, who was assassinated when Suu Kyi was only 2 years old in 1947. Yeah, he was only 32. So he was assassinated at the height of his power and popularity. He was this young 32 years old Burmese nationalist trained by the Japanese fascists to be the leader of this, the Tatmadaw. The Burmese revered Aung San. When he was assassinated, he was, made the national martyr. There are others who were assassinated along with him, but only him was basically beatified. So Aung San has had this demagogue position within the Burmese psyche. So that when Aung San Suu Kyi came into the Burmese political scene actually by accident, because she happened to be in Rangoon in 1988 when the student uprising took place, and she also had interest in getting involved in Burmese politics, and so that she being there for her mother, who was in her deathbed in Rangoon Hospital, the Burmese transferred their love, reverence, and trust into Aung San Suu Kyi. Yeah, the reverence that they had for Aung San, including someone like myself, right? And so from there, she had proven to be brave and sacrificial and, corruption-free. And she was under house arrest for 15 years. So she basically has the firmest grip on the Burmese political popular imagination. She can do no wrong. Even if she was doing wrong, the public perception is she's seen as the mother of the nation. Yeah, this is a very feudal discourse. In modern politics, we have to move away from this feudal family metaphors and analogies. And she's not a mother. She has her own interest. She tried to change the constitution. I'll give her this much, not because the constitution bars her from becoming a president, because she has 2 sons. She enjoys the privileges in other countries. But I think she genuinely believed that the constitution, and then rightly so, the constitution is inherently anti-democratic. Not just, flawed. If it is flawed, it's okay. The Constitution is made amendment-proof. It's like, but even Bible is open to multiple interpretations. Even the U.S. Constitution, one of the oldest in the world, can be amended, has been amended, right? But the Burmese Constitution, written by the military, and for their interest, to preserve their power, to keep themselves there, is the antithesis of what you and I would call constitutionalism, right? Every constitution, in essence, is or supposed to be to install a system of checks and balances. No individual, no single institution should be given monopoly control over state power, right? But contrary to that constitutionalist essence, the Burmese constitution of 2008, right, by the military, puts the military above the law, above popular will. The way they do, they place the Burmese military above the popular will is this. Chapter 9 of the Burmese constitution has 9 pages elaborating justification for and legalized lawful coup. I mean, all coups are against the rule of law. It suspends the rule of law. It declares state of emergency, vests all powers of executive, legislative, and the judiciary into a single person of the commander-in-chief. So she knows, and as she said, this is an anti-democratic one, but that was the constitution that she had to accept to play politics with the military, right? And then but on the Rohingya issue, I have to say this painfully. I supported Aung San Suu Kyi for 15 years as a foot soldier, as a student activist in US at the time. I watched Aung San Suu Kyi, I watched other Burmese dissidents who spent 10 years, 20 years behind bars, fighting for human rights, right? That's what we are all pushing for. But including Aung San Suu Kyi, we failed to internalize, as a democratic and pro-human rights movement, we failed to internalize the values and principles of human rights. By mere fact that someone is a human or a group of people are humans, they are fundamentally entitled to rights that are not alienable, right? And then we fail to extend human rights to the Rohingya because the military has institutionalized this, false view through schools, through media, through Sangha or like Buddhist organizations, that Rohingyas are illegal migrants who have the agenda of Islamicizing the Buddhist Myanmar. They come across from Bangladesh because the British needed agricultural laborers to develop the rice industry in the 1830s, 40s, 50s, and so on. Yeah, and so because of that racist and non-internalized human rights position, Aung San Suu Kyi and the entire public succumb to this, military's propaganda. They are illegal, they're unwanted. Their presence in Myanmar is an unfinished business from the Second World War and the colonial era. So the finished business, these are the words uttered by Commander-in-Chief Min Aung Hlaing in the middle of all the killings that were happening in 2017. If you portray a community of people, legal or illegal, wanted or unwanted, as unfinished business, well, the finished business is extermination, erasure of their presence, right, physically from the Burmese soil. And Aung San Suu Kyi, sadly and falsely, despite her Oxford education and other, exposure to the world, she believes in the military's propaganda. And remember, she was also surrounded by ex-military officers who themselves participated in the campaigns against Rohingya going back to 1950s. And so on the Rohingya issue, Buddhist Burmese majority, Aung San Suu Kyi, and the Burmese military, they are all on the same page. And she went to The Hague at the International Court of Justice. I watched her from a different room inside the Palace of the Peace, the same place. She was defending the military, yeah,
Mm.
and against the charges of genocide. And this is a woman who traveled around the world, Beijing, like Tokyo, Kyoto, your university, yeah, or Sydney, USA, but she refused to travel to 1 hour to go to refugee camps where, like, hundreds of rape victims are there. She's a mother, she's a widow, yeah, and she's a woman. At the very least, she could go and hear the painful
Mm.
stories and say that, I am sorry you suffer at the hands of my father's army. Instead, she stood up for the army. She called the generals my brothers because they are my father's sons, right? So that is why she fell from grace globally. And I think I understand, like, the Thai public also have some, misgivings about the Rohingya. And I think, I know, like, the Thai people are also fighting for democracy and human rights. We cannot embrace racism against Muslims or Christians or whoever, people who are different from us. We cannot be intolerant or disrespectful of their rights while we say we want human rights for ourselves.
Oh,
So this
oh.
is the lessons from Burmese democratic movement. We say human rights, and we don't fully embrace it.
Well, just a tiny intervention on this point. I mean, on the Thai position vis-a-vis Rohingya, I think it came down to, among many factors, I think in my opinion, basically coming down to two key positions. One, I think is the overall misperception toward the Rohingya. And it's not just, it doesn't only occur in Thailand, as you know, it occurs elsewhere as well, that, oh my God, they will bring, problems rather than any other thing. So that's why they were pushed out into the sea, pushed back into the sea, something like that. So, and not to mention that this is a very a Buddhist chauvinist country, right? Where there is no place for Islam, looking at the 3 provinces in Thailand as an example. Yeah. So I think there is this perception, you can call it, religious perception or whatever you want to call. That's why we has remained rather hostile toward the Rohingya. The other thing, and I will finish this very quickly for the interest of time. Don't forget that the relationship between Thailand and Myanmar at the military level has been so strong. So if this would be the position for the military of Myanmar, then Thailand have to, obey, have to basically follow as a kind of gesture for friendship. Don't forget that after the coup of 2014, your supreme commander, your army chief, right, the one that basically staged the latest coup, came to Thailand and to meet with Prayut Chan-o-cha and said, look, the coup of Thailand in 2014 was right and legitimate because this is to stop further, complications in politics. And the Burmese had to do the same, in 1988 in order to stop the situation from escalation. So of course, this has been an excuse. Now coming to this point, and I think we have about 10 minutes left. Sunny, remember when we talk about the, okay, now as just mentioned, relationship at the state level between Thailand and Myanmar, right? And then a few years back, we met in Paris and we joined, this panel of sort of dissident from Southeast Asia, you and me and another gentleman from Cambodia.
Some Ramsey.
Yeah, I try not to mention the name. But anyway, toward the end of that conference, we realized that, in fact, it maybe come from you, if ASEAN at state level can cooperate, why can't us, being on the other side, of the state, cannot cooperate, right, in order to show the solidarity? I think this is one way of us coming together to talk about the issue happened in Thailand and in Myanmar, as to show a kind of solidarity. So just a little bit, and I'll throw back at you in regard to ASEAN. I have been looking at the statement from ASEAN in the past days, especially toward the coup in Myanmar. Almost every one of them, every single ASEAN country talk about non-interference principle, that this is internal politics. We do not want to, interfere. Maybe with the exception of Indonesia, that sort of giving a little bit stronger, statement. But nonetheless, still talking about domestic situation. What can you make of this?
Well,
can we just forget ASEAN after all?
No, you're absolutely right. I think we cannot, as people or Thai people or Thai Democrats or Burmese Democrats or activists, we cannot succeed when our countries are surrounded by a sea of other authoritarian states, right? So if you look at 10-member country ASEAN bloc, if we discount Timor-Leste, because Timor-Leste has not been admitted, right? So the whole of Southeast Asia is in the hands of authoritarian regimes, right? Primarily, with the exception of Malaysia and Indonesia, right? They are moving forward. Even Indonesia is suffering from what is called a democratic regression under the second-term president there. And Malaysia had a Malaysian Spring, and then it ran into some obstacles now, as we know. I think what the takeaway from me, looking at Thai coups and Thai protest movements, and also my own countries, Cambodia, other places, is that the authoritarian states are going to sit tight, use any kind of justification, non-interference. Well, that's like absolutist, a sovereign position, the absolutist interpretation of sovereignty, right? But that position came out of Westphalia, in Germany, right? This international, what we call international, is really interstate relations, whereby states agree to trade and be diplomatic and engage in cooperative activities, so long as the states maintain the flow of money, goods, technology, and then beyond that, states can commit genocides, war crimes against the populations that they control within their own territories, right? That's why, a genocide, most of the ASEAN countries are state parties to the Genocide Convention. They have an obligation to prevent and punish genocide, right? And genocide is not covered by sovereignty. Yeah, there are crimes that are so grave that cannot be, tolerated under in the discourse of the sovereignty. So we have about 500 million people in the region. Judging from the fact that, with the exception of perhaps Brunei and Laos, every single public in ASEAN attempts to get a better, governance, attempt to expand the human rights and civil rights, most particularly Thailand and Burma. Indonesia has succeeded to a degree. ASEAN people in Southeast Asia are far more ideologically progressive and advanced. People know better. Yeah. Then we are more advanced in our thinking in terms of embracing, the tolerance and whatnot. But the ASEAN states are holding us back. And so, just yesterday, I think this morning, Ajahn Jaran sent me a note saying there is a statement issued by Thai Student Association in the United States, a statement of solidarity condemning the coup. Think about it. This is Thai students, not, ASEAN states. Thai students are far in advance in their intellectual thoughts than the ASEAN as a bloc. Think about it, young generations. And the Burmese students have done the same thing. When Thai students, including high school and middle school students, are protesting in Bangkok, the Burmese students were doing this three-finger, We were so inspired. The same with Hong Kong protests. And so I think our project as the Forces of Renewal for Southeast Asia is to push this, perspective. We will not be free, if our neighbors are not free. So we have to provide intellectual support, public relations support, moral support, material support. If, like, if you're next to, say, like a Burma, which is run by a dictatorship, if Thai intelligence follow the Thai dissidents running to Burma, the Burmese intelligence is going to pick them up and then, hand them over to the Thai intelligence, right? That's what happened with the Vietnamese, Laos, and others. And so I think the message from our organization FORSEA is that we really need to work across national boundaries, across religious identities, and across national identities. There's no other way. Every year, I mean, you used to be a diplomat, like, the heads of states and foreign minister, they lock on, one ASEAN family, a club of like a corrupt thugs and autocrats beating up little people.
Well, I mean, there's already a saying in Thailand, just I have seen it only yesterday, that we might as well include Myanmar, Burma into this new tea alliance, because in Burma, you also drink tea as well.
Absolutely.
So I will definitely gonna follow this.
Well, we've got, we then have like a 4 alliance, Hong Kong dissidents, and FORSEA issued a statement. I think we may be the only one who issued a statement in support of trans rights activists in Singapore. And then we will, in every way we can, we will support, democratic and human rights movements across Southeast Asia. And we also invite, other fellow dissidents and rights activists to work with us. We're not an NGO. We are trying to build movements across Southeast Asia. Right?
Now, this is the last one, and I really have to go, but I will start first and I'll let you end. The future from now. Okay, what I would say is that 2021 would remain challenging, for Thailand. I mean, the core student leader, even though the big protest has stopped for now, but I think it will return. And at the same time, the Thai state, continue to harass them using less majestic once again. I mean, this has to be the peak of less majestic cases. Within a few months, we have up to 60 cases. And, you would be shocked to know that one lady, has been sentenced to 87 years.
Yeah, yes. It was reduced to 40 something years.
But this is absurd. Now, I mean, in terms of what happened in Thailand, I think we will see a lot more protests this year. It would be a challenge for the monarchy. So far the monarchy has said no signal whether the monarchy would be interested to go ahead with the reform, which I do not believe it will go ahead with the reform. When it would not go ahead with the reform, I guess there would be no compromise, from the palace, and including in the institutions that support the palace. So I'm afraid that, we might head toward a kind of violent suppression. So I mean, this is something that I fear.
It is simple. I mean, like my motto is, from the freed slave Frederick Douglass. Yeah, power never concedes without a fight. It never has, and it never will. So if we want democracy, if we want freedom, if we want human rights, those authoritarian, feudal, autocratic regimes are not going to give any of that on a platter. Do you want to be free? Well, fight for your freedom. Do you want to have human rights? Fight for them and extend it to others as well. And so I think we need to plan for the long haul. This is not like, one or two events that happen in 20, 30 years.
This is really frustrating me, and I do not want to go on. This is something that, I have run into a lot of disagreement, even with a lot of democratic activists in Thailand at this moment. Some of them, oh my God, I don't know, coming out of their own imagination. Oh yeah, we can fight, but we have to be reasonable. We should not be rude. We should not. Oh my God, seriously. I don't want to talk.
This African American, lesbian poet Audre Lorde. And she has this famous line, master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. We cannot work within the institutions and political parameters that are set by our oppressive states. Be very, very unreasonable. when you are dealing with abusive, unprincipled power. That's my view. Be radical, because the systems are rotten structurally and at its very root. And so, thank you to all the Thai the dissidents who show moral support, and we are adopting the three fingers like the Thais. And so we will be calling for boycott of Myanmar military-owned businesses, and the Burmese are themselves boycotting their own military-owned businesses. And Thai businesses and that support human rights do not do business with Myanmar. Then maybe with the little businesses, okay, but stop mass tourism, and you can always go there.
That's it then.
Yeah.
I think we shall come back again, Sunny. Maybe let's watch the situation in Myanmar and let's see how it will develop into which direction. And
we should invite Ajahn Thongchai and others, and then expand this conversation to include Malaysians, Indonesians, Cambodians. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Well, you are listening to FORSEA Democratic Dialogue across struggles in Southeast Asia. I'm talking to my esteemed colleague and brother, Professor Pavin in Kyoto. And you all have a great evening.
Thank you, Sunny.